A single mom was shamed for her crying twins, not knowing the man beside her was Tikko. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The two-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor was a tiny kingdom, ruled by a benevolent but exhausted queen named Lena, and her two tiny tempestuous co-rulers, Leo and Maya. The sun had not yet risen, but the day had already declared war. It was a war waged with spilled milk, a missing teddy bear of vital strategic importance, and the dual harmony of toddler distress that served as the soundtrack to Lena's life. Every morning was a battle, but this one felt different. It felt like a final stand. In 6 hours, she had a flight to catch, and on the other side of that flight was a job interview, a sliver of a chance to trade this 4th floor walk-up for a life with a small patch of grass, to trade the constant, gnawing anxiety for a steady paycheck. She moved through the pre-dawn chaos with a practiced, weary grace, a general surveying her battlefield. One hand expertly wiped a sticky countertop, while the other guided a wriggling foot into a tiny shoe. Her own reflection in the dim kitchen window was a stranger's, a woman with dark circles under her eyes, and the ghost of sleep still clinging to her shoulders. But in her eyes, there was a fierce, unyielding light. It was the love for the two small humans, currently attempting to climb her legs, a love so powerful it was a physical force, the only thing holding her world together. Being a single mother to twins was a relentless exercise in defying entropy. It was mending scraped knees and broken hearts, celebrating crayon masterpieces on the wall even as she mentally calculated the cost of repaint, and whispering lullabies into the dark long after her own body ached for rest. The world saw a tired woman. It didn't see the lioness who fought daily battles for her cubs, who had stitched together a life from resilience and hope, whose quiet strength was more formidable than any skyscraper. This trip, this interview, wasn't just about a job. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she was more than just a struggle, more than just a single mom. She was Lena, and she was ready for a new beginning. The airport was an assault on the senses, a swirling vortex of hurried footsteps, disembodied announcements, and the low-grade hum of collective anxiety. For Lena, navigating this gauntlet with a stroller built for two, a diaper bag the size of a small nation, and two toddlers, whose curiosity had reached a fever pitch, was like competing in an Olympic event for which she had not trained. She felt the stare. They were a familiar cocktail of pity, annoyance, and thinly veiled judgment. A businessman, in a sharp suit, sighed impatiently as she fumbled with her boarding passes. A young couple, carefree and unencumbered, shot her a look that said, "Thank God that's not us." Each glance was a tiny paper cut, a reminder of how much space she and her small chaotic family took up in a world designed for streamlined efficiency. By the time she finally wrangled the twins, the stroller, and their mountain of gear onto the plane, she was drenched in a cold sweat, her nerves frayed to a breaking point. Her assigned seat was, of course, by the window, requiring the awkward, apologetic shuffle past the man who was already seated on the aisle. He was dressed in a simple, well-tailored gray suit, his hair touched with silver at the temple. He had a stillness about him that was a stark contrast to the frantic energy pulsating through Lena. He looked up from his book as she approached, his expression calm and unreadable. He didn't sigh. He didn't shift impatiently. He simply stood, took a step into the aisle, and waited with a quiet patience that was so unexpected, it felt like a profound kindness. As she maneuvered a squirming Leo into the middle seat, a worn, stuffed elephant tumbled to the floor. Before she could even bend down, the man had retrieved it, his movements smooth and economical. He handed it back to her, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. "It's a long journey for little legs," he said, his voice low and pleasant. Lena, flustered and grateful, could only manage a breathless, "Thank you." She settled into her seat, buckling Maya into her lap, feeling the man's quiet presence beside her, like a small, unexpected pocket of calm in the swirling storm of her day. The cabin doors closed, sealing her in with her hopes, her fears, and the two ticking time bombs of toddler energy currently strapped in beside her. As the plane began its powerful ascent, the inevitable happened. The change in pressure, the strange, humming confinement, the sheer overwhelming newness of it all, was too much for Leo and Maya. It started with a whimper from Leo, a high, thin sound of protest. Maya, in a show of sibling solidarity, immediately joined in, her cry a more robust, indignant wail. Lena's heart sank. She went into autopilot, her well-honed emergency protocol kicking in. She produced bottles, pacifiers, a colorful picture book, and the beloved stuffed elephant. She whispered, she rocked, she shushed, her entire being focused on containing the sonic blast emanating from her row. But the twins were inconsolable. Their cries escalated, a relentless, piercing duet that seemed to fill every inch of the pressurized cabin. That's when she heard the first volley of the assault. Sist! It came from the row behind her, a sharp, sibilant sound of pure irritation. Then a voice, dripping with condescension, cut through the air. Some people are trying to get some work done. Lena's cheeks burned with a hot flush of shame and anger. She didn't turn around. She couldn't bear to see the face that matched the voice. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking Maya, a little hard. From across the aisle, a woman in a crisp silk blouse, her face a mask of sour disapproval, glared openly at her. She caught Lena's eye, and shook her head in a gesture of theatrical disgust, before pointedly putting on a pair of noise-canceling headphones. The judgment was a palpable force, a wave of collective resentment washing over her. She felt like a failure, a public spectacle, the bad mother everyone was staring at. Her carefully constructed composure began to crumble. She felt tears of frustration and humiliation pricking at the back of her own eyes. Every shush, every whispered "it's okay, baby," felt more desperate, more futile. She was alone, trapped at 30,000 feet in a tribunal of strangers who had already found her guilty. The man beside her had remained perfectly still throughout the ordeal, seemingly absorbed in his book. His silence, which had at first felt like a kindness, now felt like another form of judgment, a quiet confirmation of her inadequacy. The world had shrunk to this humming metal tube, a prison of shame from which there was no escape. Just as Lena felt the last of her resolve about to shatter, the man beside her closed his book. The quiet snap of the cover was a small, decisive sound in the chaos. He didn't turn to the complaining passengers. He didn't offer Lena a look of pity. He turned his body slightly toward her, creating a small, intimate space that seemed to block out the rest of the cabin. "It's all right," he said, his voice calm and steady, a low note that cut through the high-pitched wailing of her children. "They're just speaking their language." Lena looked at him, startled, her tear-filled eyes wide with confusion. "They have beautiful voices," he continued, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Very expressive. This one," he nodded toward Leo, "has excellent lung capacity. A future opera singer, perhaps." The observation was so unexpected, so completely devoid of judgment, that it momentarily stunned Lena into silence. It wasn't a compliment, not really. It was a reframing. He wasn't hearing a nuisance. He was hearing communication. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze gentle. "May I?" he asked, his eyes on Leo, who was in the midst of a particularly passionate sob. Lena, at a loss, could only nod mutely. The man reached into the seat pocket in front of him, and pulled out a simple black ballpoint pen. He clicked it once, twice. The small rhythmic sound caught Leo's attention. His crying hitched. The man then held the pen up, and with a deft flick of his wrist, made it disappear behind his hand, then reappear from behind Leo's ear. It was the oldest, simplest trick in the book, but to a distressed toddler, it was pure magic. Leo's cries subsided into a watery, hiccuping silence. His eyes, wide and red-rimmed, were fixed on the pen. The man smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time, and offered the pen to the boy. "For your inspection," he said gravely, as if offering a priceless artifact. Leo took it, his small fingers fumbling with the clicking mechanism. The crisis, for the moment, was averted. Lena stared at the man, a wave of profound, overwhelming gratitude washing over her. He had not just quieted her son, He had offered her a lifeline. In a cabin full of hostile strangers, he had been the only one to offer, not just help, but something far more precious, grace. With Leo momentarily pacified by the clicking pen, and Maya finally succumbing to the gentle rocking and the hum of the engines, a fragile peace descended on their row. The silence felt sacred. Lena finally let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for the last 20 minutes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still shaky. You didn't have to do that." The man turned from watching Leo's intense study of the pen, and met her gaze. "Parenting is the hardest job in the world," he said simply, as if stating a self-evident truth. "Doing it alone is a superpower." The word superpower hung in the air, a stark contrast to the failure she had been feeling just moments before. It was a validation so profound it almost made her want to cry again, but this time, from relief. "Some days it doesn't feel like it," she admitted, her voice low. He nodded, a look of deep understanding in his eyes. "Those are the days it counts the most." A comfortable quiet settled between them. It was no longer the silence of strangers, but the shared silence of a temporary alliance. After a few minutes, he spoke again, his tone conversational. "You said it's a long journey. Are you heading home or away?" "Away," Lena replied, finding it surprisingly easy to talk to him. "I have a job interview in the city." "That's a big step," he observed. "Especially with these two. It's for a financial analyst position at a tech startup," she found herself explaining. It would change everything for us." She didn't have to elaborate. He seemed to understand the weight of that unspoken everything. He listened with an attentiveness that was almost unnerving. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice. He just listened, his quiet presence, a safe harbor. "My name is Lena, by the way," she said, realizing she hadn't even introduced herself. "And these are Leo and Maya." "It's a pleasure to meet all three of you, Lena," he replied. "I'm Elias." He didn't offer a last name or any information about himself, and Lena didn't ask. For now, he was just Elias, the kind stranger on the plane, the man who knew magic tricks with a ballpoint pen, and who saw superpowers where others only saw problems. The flight attendant came by, her expression a mixture of professional sympathy and relief that the crying had stopped. She offered Lena an extra bottle of water with a small, conspiratorial smile, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge the shift that had occurred. The animosity in the cabin had not vanished, but it had been neutralized, held at bay by the quiet, unassailable dignity of the man in the aisle seat. The peace, of course, was temporary. An hour into the flight, Maya woke up, refreshed and ready for a new round of protest. This time, it wasn't a sad cry. It was a full-throated, back-arching, leg-kicking tantrum, triggered by the simple, catastrophic injustice of a dropped cracker. Lena tried to soothe her, but Maya was beyond reason, her small body rigid with fury. The fragile truce in the cabin instantly shattered. The woman in the silk blouse, who had taken off her headphones, slammed her laptop shut with a loud, aggressive clap. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she declared, her voice loud enough for the entire section to hear. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, turning to face Lena, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "There are limits. If you can't control your children, you shouldn't be allowed to fly. You are ruining this flight for everyone. You should have driven." The accusation, so public and so venomous, hit Lena like a physical blow. Her face went white. She felt the blood drain from her head, leaving her dizzy and sick. She clutched a hysterical Maya to her chest, trying to shield her from the woman's anger, but she felt utterly exposed, utterly defeated. There was nothing she could say. Any defense would sound like an excuse. Any apology would be insufficient. The other passengers shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact, others watching the drama with a kind of morbid curiosity. Lena was on an island, and the tide of public shame was rising, about to pull her under. She looked at Elias, expecting to see a flicker of annoyance, the end of his patience. She wouldn't have blamed him, but his expression wasn't annoyed. It was something else. It was a kind of cold, quiet anger, an expression of steel that she hadn't seen before. He slowly and deliberately placed his book on the empty middle seat. Then he unbuckled his own seatbelt and rose to his feet, placing himself squarely between Lena and her accuser. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over everyone. Elias did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded a sudden, sharp silence. He looked at the woman in the silk blouse, his gaze steady and piercing, and he spoke, his voice calm, clear and carrying an authority that was absolute. "Ma'am," he began, "you are correct about one thing. This is unacceptable." The woman preened, a smug look of vindication on her face. But Elias wasn't finished. "It is unacceptable," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, drawing the entire cabin into his confidence, "that in a world of miraculous technology that allows us to fly through the sky, we have somehow lost the basic human technology of compassion." The woman's smirk faltered. "It is unacceptable that we have forgotten that a public space is a shared space, which requires a shared burden of tolerance, and it is deeply, profoundly unacceptable to publicly shame a mother who is doing her absolute best in a difficult situation." He paused, letting his words sink in. His gaze swept over the other passengers, not with accusation, but with a kind of quiet disappointment. "What you hear is a nuisance," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I hear as a sign of healthy attachment and a developing nervous system struggling to cope with an overwhelming environment. What you see as a failure of discipline, I see as a testament to a mother's unending patience." He then turned his head slightly, his eyes finding Lena. "I can assure you," he said, his voice now gentle, but still loud enough for all to hear, "that no one on this aircraft is more distressed by this sound than this woman. Her only crime is her unconditional love and her refusal to give up, a quality I think we should be admiring, not condemning." Then he turned back to the woman in silk, who now looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "The flight attendant can move you to another seat if you wish, but the problem, I assure you, is not with this family." And with that, he sat back down, picked up his book, and the trial was over. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum filled with the weight of his words. The woman in silk sank into her seat, her face burning, and did not say another word for the rest of the flight. Elias had not just defended Lena. He had fundamentally redefined the reality of the situation for everyone present. The ripple effect was immediate and profound. The atmosphere in the cabin, once charged with hostility, was now thick with a mixture of awe and shame. The man across the aisle, who had previously stared out the window, now met Lena's eyes and gave her a small, supportive nod. A few rows back, a college-age student who had been scowling earlier now had a look of dawning comprehension on his face. The flight attendant returned, not with water this time, but with 2 small cups of warm milk and a package of cookies. "For the little ones," she said, her voice soft and her eyes full of a new, sincere respect. "And please, let me know if there's anything at all you need." She trailed off, looking at Lena. Lena supplied, her voice still a bit weak. The flight attendant smiled. "Anything you need, Lena." Elias, for his part, acted as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He had turned his attention to Maya, who, stunned into silence by the sudden shift in the cabin's emotional climate, was now quietly sobbing against her mother's shoulder. Elias began to hum, a low, tuneless, and surprisingly calming melody. He didn't try to take her or distract her. He just hummed, providing a steady, gentle sound for her to anchor to. After a few minutes, Maya's sobs subsided, and she slumped against Lena, fast asleep. The rest of the flight passed in a strange, peaceful bubble. A quiet understanding now existed between Lena, Elias, and the rest of the passengers. They were no longer just a collection of strangers. They were a community that had been given a powerful, unexpected lesson in empathy. As the plane began its descent, Elias finally closed his book for good. "You handled that with incredible grace," he said to Lena quietly. "I didn't handle anything," she replied, shaking her head. "I was falling apart. You saved me." "No," he said, his gaze serious. "You were holding on. I just gave you a place to stand." His words resonated deep within her. He didn't see her as a victim he had rescued. He saw her as a hero who had needed a moment of reinforcement. It was a subtle but powerful distinction. In his eyes, she was not weak, she was strong. And for the first time that day, maybe for the first time in years, she started to believe it herself.
So this startup, Elias said, as the plane taxied toward the gate. What do they do? They're developing a new AI-driven platform for financial risk assessment, Lena explained. The technical details a welcome distraction. Their algorithm is supposed to be revolutionary. She pulled a slightly crumpled folder from her bag. I've been following their work for a while. It's brilliant, Elias nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. May I? He asked, gesturing to the folder. Lena hesitated for a fraction of a second, then handed it over. It contained her resume and her portfolio of work, analyses she had done, models she had built in her precious few quiet hours after the twins were asleep. He read through it, his eyes moving quickly, but with an intense focus. He wasn't just skimming, he was absorbed. Lena felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. The opinion of this quiet, authoritative stranger suddenly mattered to her immensely. He looked up from her resume, a look of genuine impressiveness on his face. This is very high-level work, Lena. Your analysis of market volatility clustering, it's exceptional. You have a gift for seeing patterns others miss. The praise, so specific and so well-informed, was more validating than any generic compliment. Thank you, she said, feeling a blush of pride. He handed the folder back to her. The interview is at 2 o'clock, she nodded. Then I won't keep you, but I have a proposition for you. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. He wrote a name and a number on the back of it. The company you're interviewing with, Innotech, is partially funded by a venture capital firm that my foundation works with very closely. I know the CEO. The position you're applying for is a good one, but it's not the right one for you. It's too small for your talent. Lena stared at him, bewildered. Your ability to manage chaos, to find patterns in distress, to remain calm under extreme pressure, that's a skill set that goes far beyond financial analysis. It's a skill set in human systems. He tapped the business card. I have a meeting this afternoon with a colleague who runs a social impact initiative. We're looking for a new director of operations, someone who can manage complex projects, allocate resources under pressure, and who understands on a deep, fundamental level what it means to support people who are struggling. The job you're interviewing for pays well. This one, he paused. This one changes lives. Starting with your own. He offered her the card. Call this number. Tell them Elias Vance sent you. The interview is yours if you want it. Lena looked down at the card. The name on the front read, Dr. Elias, and underneath it, a title that made her breath catch in her throat. Founder and chairman, the Global Children's Initiative. The kind stranger, the man with the pen, was one of the world's leading pediatric philanthropists and child development experts, and he thought she was a hero. The airport, which had been a place of torment on arrival, felt entirely different on the ground. As Lena deplaned, juggling her now sleeping children, she felt a new sense of purpose, a calm confidence that had been absent just a few hours before. Elias walked with her through the terminal, helping her navigate the final stretch to the baggage claim. He didn't say much more about the job offer. He had planted the seed, and he was giving her the space to let it grow. When her stroller and bags finally appeared, he helped her load everything onto a cart. They stood there for a moment in the bustling terminal, an unlikely trio, the world-renowned philanthropist, the single mother, and the two sleeping toddlers who had, in their own way, brought them together. I don't know how to thank you, Elias, Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. You've changed more than just my day. He smiled, that same warm, genuine smile. You have an important choice to make, Lena. Whatever you decide, you're going to succeed. I have no doubt about that. He looked at the sleeping faces of Leo and Maya. They have a remarkable mother, and with a final gentle nod, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Lena standing with her children, a business card clutched in her hand like a winning lottery ticket. She looked at the two choices before her, the interview she had prepared for, a path to stability, and the opportunity Elias had offered her, a path to purpose. She thought about his words, a skill set in human system. For years she had thought of her life as a series of chaotic, overwhelming challenges to be endured. He had made her see it as a training ground, one that had forged a unique and powerful strength within her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the number for the taxi service. Then, With a deep breath and a surge of newfound conviction, she dialed the number on the back of the card. A few months later, the view from Lena's window was no longer a brick wall and a fire escape. It was a small green yard, where two happy, laughing children were chasing a ball. Her new apartment was modest, but it was hers, and it was filled with light. Her new job as director of operations for the initiative was more challenging and more rewarding than she could have ever imagined. She was no longer just analyzing numbers. She was changing lives, creating programs that supported families just like her own had been. She never forgot the flight, the moment that had pivoted her life in a new direction. It served as a constant reminder that our greatest challenges can forge our greatest strengths, and that sometimes the person sitting next to us, a stranger on a journey, can see the hero within us, that we have forgotten how to see ourselves. What is the true measure of a person? Is it the job title on their business card, the clothes they wear, or the volume of their voice? Or is it found in the quiet moments, in the unseen battles, in the grace we show to others when it would be easier to show judgment? Lena's story is a powerful reminder that the struggles we endure are not just obstacles, they are the very things that shape our character and forge our unique strengths. The world saw her as a frazzled, incompetent mother, a nuisance in a public space. But Elias Vance, a man trained to see the true nature of things, saw something entirely different. He saw a leader, a crisis manager, a woman of extraordinary resilience and boundless love. He saw a superpower. How often do we make the same mistake as the passengers on that plane? How often do we see a crying child and blame the parent without considering the invisible weight they might be carrying? How often do we judge a person's story by its cover, writing them off before we've even read the first chapter? The encounter at 30,000 feet was more than just a chance meeting. It was a collision of two worlds that revealed a universal truth. Empathy is a choice, and it is the most powerful choice we can make. It has the power to silence shame, to restore dignity, and to change the course of a life. Elias did not just offer Lena a job, he offered her a new lens through which to see herself, reflecting back to her the strength and worth she had possessed all along. And in doing so, he reminds us all to look for the hero in the person sitting next to us, to choose compassion over condemnation, and to remember that every single person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. Be kind, always.